Welcome to the 20th of November Risk and Assurance Committee meeting, which is being live streamed. We have no apologies, but we do have one councillor requesting speaking rights, and that's Councillor Ultra. So I'll so move. Is anyone second? Thank you, Councillor Swales. Everyone happy with that? Oh, thank you. Passed. Right. There is no one declaration of interest. Please let our Democratic advisor know. Over forum, we have no one wanting to present. So we'll move straight on to items for the credit rating report.
Chair, before you continue, I need to leave at 6.
Oh, that's very good. So there's two people need to leave. Mayor Guppy would like to leave at 5:45 and Councillor Griffiths would like to leave at 6. So we have a forum.
Four.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
So item 4, Kate, do you have any update on this, or we shall ask for questions from council?
No, I'll let the report
Okay. There's just one thing is that recommendation A is okay, but we'd like to add a second recommendation B, which says note that officers have published the latest credit rating report on council's website rather than what's stated. So the credit rating has been published now, and so we just need to change that that wording of recommendation B. Okay, I've been enough.
I do have.
What you do?
Sorry.
Thank you, Kate.
I think it is important to note that in the context, paragraph 6, there's 25 councils in New Zealand with a credit rating. So although Upper Hutt and A is the lowest, it is important to note, I believe, that having a credit rating is an achievement in itself. And I would like to remind the committee that an A is the best rating, level of rating you can get. So what we're talking about is being an A rather than A plus or an A double minus, you know, like A minus. So the context is where the rating is a good rating, having an A. Yes, we've been downgraded within the band of A, but Upper Hutt City Council still maintains an A credit rating. I don't think that flavour comes through the report, so I just want to give that context.
Thank you. Any questions, Councillor Swan?
I'd like to actually add on to what Peter said, because I know that we did a bit of a press release around there, and I don't think we articulated it properly to the community that whilst it was a downgrade, because that's immediately what they thought, we didn't articulate that it actually doesn't put any additional costing on our lending margin. It is still the same, and that actually we didn't emphasise that we've gone from a negative to a stable, which I think is another important thing that our community need to know. And it just emphasises this Standard & Poor's global report that actually it's important to have it. We're only one of 25, which I don't think we articulated very well, and that at the end of the day, you know, if it tells us that we've got to stay true to actually the LTP, and if we don't do that, then we fall right, and that's possibly to the detriment of our recommendation with the Standard & Poor's. So these are things that need to be communicated, I think, in a way that it's not our speak, but it's the community speak, so that they understand actually what it means when we translate it. So I agree with you, Kate. It isn't a bad report that we've got. I think it works really well for us. So thank you to the team.
Yeah.
Through Chair, I do wonder whether it's worthwhile actually noting some of those stuff as additional recommendations that we're noting. But I also wonder whether from a general community perspective, you know, the report did talk about that in some ways implied that it could have been lower if in fact some of the hard decisions hadn't been made during the LTP, and also indicated that in fact if the LTP plan wasn't followed, that in fact a lower drop could occur. And I just wonder whether that's useful context for the community, because in fact I do think, you know, probably know it's pain to deal with that positions, but actually understanding that actually some of that pain does mean that you've avoided having additional cost of borrowing. Because if you'd actually dropped lower than that, you would have actually had a higher interest cost. Because you would have been into that next bracket. So I do think that there's worth, real value in highlighting that without actually making some of the hard decisions that you did during the LTP, it could have cost you an awful lot more in terms of ongoing borrowing costs.
So we'll include that as a recommendation C, which I've got wording for.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Lynn.
Yep, just Chair, just want to sort of note that while we say these things, there really isn't a mechanism for us to communicate these things to the public. So, yep, we're saying it to ourselves and anyone who might be online at this moment. But otherwise, we cannot dictate what's going to be in the newspaper. And there's only really one newspaper. And as for the rest of it, it'd just be a social media message.
What I'm hearing, thank you, is that another press release wouldn't be a bad starting point. So that I'm happy to write that and put it out. So we'll start with that and see if that we can talk to James and see what we get. That's the best I can.
Okay, fine. We'll note that. Yes. Cool, thank you. All right, any other questions? If not, we'll move to the recommendations. So we'll just do them one at a time. I'll move that we receive and note the report entitled Credit Rating Report. Second, please. Councillor Beckley, will favor say aye. Aye. Recommendation B, note that officers have published the latest credit rating report on the council's website. I'll say move. Second, please. Miss Sarah and Miss Brownlee. All in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. And C, the new one. I'll say it slowly. So you can note that the A credit rating would have been lower had not had the LTP financial strategy not been adopted. Have you got that? That encompasses all those other things as well. So I'll say it again. Note that the A credit rating would have been lower had the LTP financial strategy not been adopted.
And through your chair, I will put that into some. Plain English.
So the financial strategy includes the funding of depreciation, the debt level of 230, 250 and 230, increasing the rates as well, and all those other measures that were taken. So had that not been adopted, which is in the LTP, which is the new financial strategy in the LTP, then the credit rating would likely be lower. I'll move that. Have a second. I have a second first. You second it, thank you.
To ask, you didn't want recommendation instruct our group manager of corporate services to put out a press release. She'll just do that on her own.
That's been noted already that we're going to take further action to release further information. Okay. Right, so the motion has been put and seconded. I'll put it to the vote. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Derek. Thank you. We'll move on to the.
Can I just make a comment here before you move on? Thank you. It's just that I appreciate what Kate is going to do with regard to a press release, but I think as elected members around the table, it would be good if we could either share it, amplify it, just to make sure that we do appreciate that there are some gaps in our consultation and it's been thrown up in some of our feedback from the community. So if we could assist in anything that our officers do by doing that, that would be great.
Councillor Swales. I'll move on to item number 5, which is the recommendation from the Dentons Kensington Swan. Anyone have any questions? Okay, so we'll go through, sorry. Yes,
Just noting that recommendations 6 and 8 are now expected to be delivered a year late. Just wondering whether officers could talk through the impacts of these being delivered later.
Recommendation 8. Well, it's simply done for training, staff, we've got this new staff member, we've got a staff member on rental leave. So I think the risk of that is minimal, it's simply late, I don't know that there is any implication when I talk to the manager. She didn't seem to think it was a concern, to this point, at this point. And item 6, again, didn't see it as being, because of the substance in item 6 is largely there. So it's more a matter of finishing off and then.
Right, thank you.
Item 6 is an item of completeness, if I can put it that way.
so I would like to move through each recommendation as we've done in the past. Councillor Swales, before we do that.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to go back to item 6 with regard to, you know, the manual of delegations. It's just that we did say that we were going to do a second review of this once we finish the restructure of where we landed as a council. It would be really good to have a timeline of when that final review of the manual of delegations, considering there were a couple of things that we missed, if we had a timeline, that would be great.
Through you, Chair. With February.
Agree?
With that. Yeah, just checking the legal counsel.
So that'll come to the next Personal Insurance Committee. Or policy.
Risk
Risk.
insurance.
Okay, so we'll consider,
Chair.
is it a question or is it we're going to go through each recommendation, so can we get so recommendation 3, can we close that off, please? So it seems to be now completed.
Through the chair.
All right, thank you. So all in favour of closing it off? Okay, thank you. So that's closed. Now we're on recommendation. Let's do recommendation 5 and 6 together. Councillor Bentley, do you have any question on that?
No, mine's on recommendation 15 and 16.
Very good. Okay, just looking at recommendation 5, Group Manager Corporate Services recommends that we can close recommendation 5. Does anyone have any objection to that? Right, so we'll close that one off. Thank you. Which leaves us recommendation 6. Any comment? But besides what we've already had on recommendation 6. If not, we'll move on to recommendation 7, introduce a compliance strategy. So we can close that one off. Right. So anyone object to closing off 7? We'll close that one off. Thank you. Now we come to 8. That will stay because it's now due for completion on June 25. 15 and 16 we included for completeness, they will drop off. Would you have a question?
Yeah, I remember at the last meeting I asked if it would be prompted to the residents that this will be closed as a heads up that their window is dwindling for this training. Was that done?
Don't know. That's the honest answer.
Then we leave it open.
Leave it open.
Yeah, leave it open.
Yeah. Sorry.
Anything else? All right, so let's move to the recommendations. I'd like to have, as well as the one that's on the paper, we'll deal with that first. I move that the committee recommends the council receive and notes the report entitled Recommendations for the Dentons Kensington Swan report. Second, Councillor Swales, thank you. Put it to the vote. All in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Right. And the second recommendation I'd like to have is notes that recommendations 3, 5 and 7 are now closed. Okay, so I'll move that and Sarah Brownlee second it. All in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you. Turning to item
I'll
6,
get you another one of these.
risk management report. Right. Any update? Manager?
Thank you, Chair. Just context, I've recut the way we do this. I'm trying to bring it into the flow of the long-term plan. So is what I'm trying to do. So the assumptions, that significant forecasting assumptions that were part of the long-term plan document are commented on where appropriate in this document. And what I was trying to do was put the external world into the background of informing that, whereas previously we've focused on the external world a bit, which has largely been information that you can get from any public source. So I'm welcoming feedback on the change of approach and whether it's right or whether it's helpful or whether you'd rather do it the old way. And then there's the 4 deep dives that you asked for there. We are deliberately not updating anything other than what is a deep dive. ELT have been going through these and looking at them, and we just focus on if we think we're off track. And there's a page, new page there, I think it's page 30. Provided. Page 30, which on the far right hand side says indicates things that we think could be at risk of not being on track. But we haven't delved into defining what off track or on might mean at this point. Then page 31 is just the schedule which the committee might want to look at this process.
Councillor Brooks.
On page 30, the ones that are needing support, i.e. the blue ones or.
So if we,
deep dives in the near future.
it's not so much wanting them as deep dives, no. It is more saying that if I use the example of external policy changes, what we are saying there is that to keep it on track is quite challenging for us, and it is beyond our control. Because in that instance, as is commonly known, central government are making rapid changes, and local government councils are having to respond to those changes, which means our energy and resources are going into doing that work, and other work won't get the prioritisation that maybe it previously would have. Does that explain why we've judged it how we have?
Chair,
Councillor
can I ask a question?
Certainly.
The risk snapshot for natural capital, the one at the bottom. The wording, I think there's a few words missing there. The council is not fully compliant with legislation requirements and on track to meet carbon zero targets 2035. It either needs some punctuation there, because on one side it says we're not fully compliant, and then are we on track to meet carbon or not? And then the council is willing to be a leader in the natural capital space and prioritise the environment above economic and social requirements. And I just wondered what did we mean by that?
So, through your chair, these were written back in October 23. If you remember, we had a workshop and councillors worked these through. Officers put these back to councillors and said, here's the words. So we have what does that mean? That means that what we discussed in particular relevance to that one is that you have the concept of C being S for social, E for economic, and E for environment. So 3 pieces of the puzzle. And this would say that you were going to prioritise the environment above economic and social return. So, random example, you wouldn't chop any trees down because that was the most important thing in the world to you, but that you might suffer economically, you might suffer socially, but you can be your natural capital.
Right, and I suppose I'm just wondering, is that still where we're at, given our financial position?
Councillor, we can address that in February because natural capital is to be having a deep dive in February, so
Okay.
we can address that in February.
Okay, good. So I'm just highlighting it.
Through your chair, I know that offline I've given some feedback through to officers about things that I would like to get included in the deep dives when they come out for the ones that aren't here today. So I won't dwell on those, but one I did wonder was around risk 8, which is our culture survey, is our organisational culture. And I'm really conscious that obviously with the change of CE earlier in the year, you've effectively now had your reorg structure. I did put forward a recommendation that it was probably timely to think about doing a culture survey. And did ask, I guess, officers, whether there were any plans in place. So I'm just wondering whether you'd be able to just talk about those.
Through you, Chair, yes, we'd look at doing that in February, March, next year.
Thank you.
I'd just like to add to that, with regard to it. I don't think that when we do that survey internally, is there any way that we can do it that it's more anonymous than what it is at the moment? Because I've heard through a number of different officers that they don't always feel as if it's anonymous enough for them to be quite brutally truthful, I suppose, about some of the questions that are there.
Through you, Chair, well, it is anonymous. I know what you're saying though. It has come up as an issue because to do any type of reporting, unless you put some demographics like a team or a group or something like that, you can't really do very much reporting. So we have done it where we haven't put demographics and just more done general reports, which is fine when you're doing more a pulse survey, but if you're doing a longer survey, not having any demographics to do drill down reporting doesn't help. So yes, we can look at which way we do it.
Okay. And how frequently does that happen?
Usually that we do a big survey which rates us against other councils. We would normally do that every 2 years. Now then pulse surveys are as we decide, but this year hasn't really been a normal year, so we haven't done any surveys.
So when we do it next year in 2025, the next one won't happen until 2027.
So we can do a survey at any time. We can decide that. So
as officers?
Yes. Yeah. So I would suggest that we would do another one in 6 months after we do the one that we will run.
And that's, sorry, through you, Chair. So that doesn't incur any external costing. This is all done internally.
It does. We use a survey tool that we have a license for, but it won't incur additional costs because we're doing more surveys because we have the tool available to use at any time.
Okay.
Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. Just on page 34, the deep dive on reputation at risk. Just wonder if I could have a bit of clarity around the action plan. Continue with regular engagement through targeted channels and community management, noting a change in resourcing and a shift of focus to core activities. That's not saying that communication is not a core activity, is it?
No, we're not trying to say that.
Because it reads that way a little bit.
No, we're not trying to say that.
Can we just address the action plan deep dive separately? So just asking for any comments on the paper except for the deep dives, and then we'll look at each deep dive.
Can you make that clear at the start then?
Sorry, I was asking for questions.
Yeah,
Questions.
yeah,
Fine.
question.
Yeah, that's fine. Just one point on page 22, 12 about the interest on debt. Well, for the next 3 years, that's likely to trend down because the cash rate is coming down. However, when we get to the paper on Treasury risk management on page 42, power 18, the interest rate trends back upwards after 3 years. So just a point, don't get too excited that interest rate is trending down, but after 3 years, it's going to trend back up again. The other point is on page 24 under contracts, quality and quantity, where it says assurance process policy has been approved by council in June for renewal. That renewal will be available in the first quarter of 25, so it'll be done then.
So first quarter of 25.
Yeah.
That's the procurement policy.
Yeah. And I'll come back to that. I think we should have a discussion after we've done the deep dives, whether or not the community engagement residual risk rating of low is still appropriate. So I think I'd like to have that discussion after the deep dive. So now could we pay attention to the first deep dive, which is health, safety and awareness. Where you see target risk, it actually means current risk, not target risk. So just to note that as well, each of the deep dives as well.
So before we get to the deep dives, can I go back to the questions?
Yep.
So under the funding, which is in page 24. Right, and it's probably a question for Kate, which is the mitigation controls, develop forward-looking financial forecasts to ensure understanding of cost compliance with treasury management. So I like the way that you've broken down this reporting, that it actually ties into the LTP, which is something that we have not had that transparently before. So thank you for doing that. But when it comes to some of these proposed mitigation controls, I suppose when we do the deep dive, where I see that you've got first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, is that where these things will come into? Because the chair and the one above said that it's the procurement is coming in that first quarter of 2025. It would be nice to know of these other things when they're going to come back to us, particularly around, forecasting the financials and the compliance with treasury management investment policy.
I'll go back to my earlier comment, which is unless we do a deep dive, we tend not to update things. It just happens to be that the procurement policy it is due to be updated.
Yeah.
And so it's coming back and will be done in March. If we take the funding one and the mitigations, yes, that drops out in the quarters 1, 2, and 3 when we do the deep dive and unpack these things. And when we can actually action the mitigate, how we're actioning the mitigations. I mean, we do have a separate sort of way we think about it, but it's not in this report.
So some of this drop down menu, sorry, through you, Chair, would then come to the Finance Committee.
The finance project, but the thing with the finance committee is some of our forecasting comes through there as reporting.
Yeah.
And we're in that stage of as we start into in the first quarter we don't do forecasting. We start that sort of in the second half of the year as we roll into the annual plan or the long-term plan. So you'll see forecasting come through here in the I think it is finance and performance committee.
So they will start coming through there because it is in reference to the rates.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just coming back to your comment, Kate, around the report. I'm comfortable in terms of, the including commentary under the LTP assumptions. However, the one that I guess I wouldn't mind, and I guess it's a personal thing in terms of being on the committee, is actually including where there's central and local government updates. If it doesn't logically fit under one of your LTP assumptions, to actually include that as a separate section. I wouldn't necessarily be wanting to wait until if external policy changes comes up for a deep dive. It would be useful to stay abreast of, some of those changes. And I'm just really conscious that because I'm not sitting around council, I may not always get those updates that you're giving everyone else. So that would be useful if that can continue.
Thank you. I like that.
So through you, Chair, can I ask that? So it's para 9 on assumption 5. Would you suggest that the final sentence there, resourcing and funding these changes is a potential challenge for council? Are you asking that be expanded on, be more explicit? Is that sort of if
it logically fits under one of the LTP assumptions, but there may be some things that don't. So I guess I'm just saying if there's things that have come to attention around policy changes, it would be useful to include them as a separate para, even if they don't link through to an assumption.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so shall we then move on to the deep dive, health, safety and wellness? And I'll open up to councillors for questions, comments.
So I did have the opportunity, obviously, to talk to officers before the meeting, but one thing that I have asked them to consider is that the Institute of Directors have issued a good practice guide on health and safety, and I've just asked whether officers can actually go through that good practice guide and assess whether there's any advice out of that we should be bringing forward into reporting through to council, and also probably just thinking about whether there's any additional type of information that should be coming up to councillors to ensure that councillors are fulfilling their obligations under the Health and Safety Act. And so that in fact you don't end up in a situation that if an event arises, that you haven't had the information coming to you that you know, potentially you would have expected that you would be aware of. And I guess there was one other area associated with where you might be a joint PCBU that I've also just asked them whether they can actually just put some investigate about how when you're actually working with other organisations about how that might work.
Yep. Very good.
So these are the questions, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on this particular deep dive? We're all happy with it? Okay, all right, so we'll move on to the next deep dive, which is the external shock. So the current risk here is high. Any questions?
Through you, Chair. One of the things in this risk is all risk is high and the targeted and residual risk is high. Even though we do plenty in this space, that's how we assess it as being.
Yes, right.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Is there any move from central government or local remo in any of their policy changes or how we react to some of these natural disasters or happenings that we need to be updated with?
Through you, Chair, there are a number of things happening in that space. Primarily, you'll recall the post-Gabrielle report. There are some proposed changes to NEMA, and that will bring about changes, potential changes in some of the responsibilities for council, with a greater emphasis on working with groups within the community to particularly provide that ongoing welfare support post an event. Locally, there is currently a review of REMO, which is about to start, and that will, nobody's quite sure where that will lead to, but it will probably mean a slight refocusing of the range of services that REMO provide back to what the core expectations will be in terms of the legislative changes that we anticipate coming. And a lot of that is from a REMO perspective is going to be more focused on response. There is also and less on recovery. Recovery is going to be viewed more as a BAU type activity that councils should have more control and influence over. The short answer though is that there is a lot of change coming, and we can't be totally explicit as to what that's going to look like till in particular the REMO review is completed.
Can I ask a subset? Thank you for that quite comprehensive, picture of the landscape that we're in. So with the switch in focus with regard to recovery and it being more on local government to probably instigate that rather than the support and that from central government, I suppose that's going to start putting a lot more pressure on the finances and the debt level of local government, isn't it? And we won't know what that might look like until those discussions are had, I suppose. And it's just something that we maybe need to be cognizant of when we look at those things.
Yeah, through you, Chair, that's absolutely correct. And we've already seen a flavour of that with the Transport Agency recently announcing changes to the criteria and how they fund, in particular, flood damage works. And initially, going back not too far, some councils for some categories were able to get a 90% subsidy rate to fix things that were broken. Those subsidy rates have been cut back to the normal subsidy rate that you would get, which in our case would be 51% instead of 90%. Those things start to have a real impact when they happen, obviously, but there is also an expectation that when you build back in a more resilient way, but there is no commensurate funding to go with that. So there is an expectation that resilience will somehow be a goal that we aspire to, but at the moment, no indication of funding. There is also, I guess, likely to be the aim of this, I suspect, from a government perspective, is that first of all, things are more resilient, so they don't take as much putting back together. But secondly, when they do take putting back together, the community themselves and councils are better resourced to undertake that activity. Now, of course, we all know that if you're at or near your borrowing limit, you've really got very little headroom to work in terms of how you might fund that sort of activity if and when it occurs. So, yeah, it is not a particularly promising outlook.
Thank you.
Chair, I'm just interested in hearing officers talk about the ratings, because I'm aware that the raw rating is rated as a extreme consequence with a possible likelihood resulting in a high, and then after doing all of our measures, basically we're saying it's still an extreme consequence and there's still a possible likelihood, which, you know, in typical business you might go, well, what's the point of doing any controls if you're actually doing all of these controls isn't actually having an impact. And I'm just wondering whether we need to describe that story a little bit better in the conclusion to go, it doesn't actually alter the consequence nor the likelihood, but in fact there is I guess a moral obligation and a reputational obligation to actually do a whole lot of those controls in some ways to demonstrate that you are doing everything you can do to manage an external shock, even though in fact it doesn't actually alter your risk.
Through you, Chair, yes, there is a level of granularity you can apply to this whole thinking.
Yeah.
And I guess what we've done is being conservative and gone to worst case. For example, a magnitude 9 on the Hikarangi fault. No matter how much you plan for that, you are going to be in extreme strife after it happens. I mean, under that scenario, they're talking about, 4 minutes of shaking in Auckland, which is quite a long way from where the fault is. That shaking is at a level where you can't stand up. We're much closer. So irrespective of how well you plan for that, how many bottles of water you've got stored, all those sorts of things, you just have not a lot of confidence that you're going to come out in good shape. And so, worst case is that. Coming backwards, you've got the Gabrielle type event, which is, severe, but perhaps not as devastating for everybody. And then at the other end of the scale, you might have something like localised flooding, where you would hope that the impact is not community-wide. So yes, there is a level of granularity you could apply. I guess we just went to the worst case.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, your point is well made on giving a bit more context, because certainly when we discuss these things, and I put my finance hat on, recent history says money's not going to be as forthcoming as perhaps it would have been in 2011 when Christchurch had certain and climate change and weather events are more frequent, and so you're seeing more of these things. So our ability to rely on funding is not, we don't feel as confident as perhaps we would have been years ago.
Look, thank you, Chair. And yes, the other issue is, of course, insurance. Because as these events become more common and devastating, the ability to insure against them diminishes.
And we're currently in a soft insurance market.
Okay.
Through you, Chair, I'm conscious that at the moment there doesn't sort of seem to be anything in the action plan in terms of that timeline. Just wondering whether officers are able to talk about whether there is any sort of actions on the horizon over the next 4 quarters in regards to this deep dive risks.
BCPs get updated every 6 months, don't they? Yeah, so that's really it's all focused. Sorry, through you, Chair. The BCPs get updated every 6 months, so it's all through there, but with sessions out. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, right, so we're happy on that deep dive, so we'll move on to the third one, which is reputation and trust. Okay, up for comment and question, Councillor Newell.
This one needs quite a bit of proofreading.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah. The conclusion and action plan and the what next. It's a bit awkward to say this, but I think the statement, council under the mayor's guidance continues to operate in a collegial and robust manner. When we have had some, well, I suppose robust, maybe that is the word, discussions around the table that haven't always, I think, been completely resolved. So I'm just wondering, how do we, that just makes it sound like everything's sweetness and light, but I'm not entirely sure that it is. So I'll just sort of throw that in there. And then just the tenor of the thing just sounds a little bit positive about the whole, how's our relationship with the community. I think we've got some risks there. I think we're trying to fix them, but I'm just not sure if I'm seeing quite how that's reflected. It just seems a little bit, what's the word, like a cut and paste rather than an analysis.
For you, Chair, I'll start and then I'll ask my CEO to add. I think what you're seeing here is an honest report. I'll put it that way. And I think we've got work to do. And I think what I would acknowledge is we've just been through an organisational restructure and we've had close to 100% turnover of staff in some areas. So we have to settle down into that and work out how that's.
But Chair, some of that is outside. Maybe it isn't something that what I'm getting at there is it's not necessarily something that the staff can deal with. This is something that's our responsibility.
And for you to share, when this was written, there was very much a sense in October 2023 that there was an element of it that was about the leadership of the organisation comes from the governance group and filters through the organisation. So that's how we wrote it at the time. Yeah, I'm just saying it's the context.
So what's missing in the discussion at the Chair's meeting on Monday is that under the key controls, there are a number of key controls that should be included. And that one is that while we're releasing the workshop information, we have yet to consider workshops live streaming. So that is a key control. I think that should be listed here as a future control. The other one is communications becoming more proactive, which isn't listed here. The third one is increased community involvement in making decisions. And that's come through quite clearly in the last 3 or 4 months. And the last one is addressing the survey results. So there are a number of key controls that I don't think are actually listed in this. Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Chair. The action plan, I think, it's not much of an action plan. It's just describing stuff that we do, but it's not really of how we're going to get better. Especially all the ones that start with continue. And I'm still confused at the inclusion of that line, noting the change in resourcing and shift to focus to core activities. I just want, why was that put in there? Is it to say that, yeah, I don't know why it was put in there. Can I have a bit of rationale?
Noting the changes to core activities.
Yeah. No, the change in resourcing, we tried communication staff. FTA?
Through you, Chair, the LTP focus was very much coming back to.
Yep. But why is that, what's that got to do with the communication and engagement?
Through you, Chair, the communication and marketing teams were combined teams, and yet we reduced the marketing team, which overall has had an impact on the numbers of staff within those teams, which means they're have to refocus on what their things they might have done previously, refocus what the priorities are.
Yeah. Well, what I'm getting at is just, I don't want it to, this reorganisation, not to be an excuse for reduced communication, because that is a core activity, if not the core activity. One of the ultimate ones. And so I think we need to beef it up in a way, and it's just the action plan doesn't give me much confidence. So I think, I'm not sure we never need to have a workshop again on this, to beef up our, we had a workshop about 2 years ago, and some really good stuff started to happen, and it's just dropped off. We had these pre-council meeting posts go out, letting the community know what was going to happen, and post-council meeting stuff, and that stopped. And it's, yeah, just feeling that,
Chair, I think to answer Councillor Bentley's comments there, I think one of the words that's missing out of that action plan is the communication strategy. You know, it's all very well as just sending stuff out, but what's the strategy behind it? And I think that's the word that I can't see in there. And that again is potentially where the staffing reduction could be a problem.
I appreciate the fact, Chair, that you highlighted a number of things that came up in the Chair's meeting, because I absolutely, they tick all the boxes of the things that I wanted to bring up. So you've done that. But, you know, I think we need to understand and appreciate what is the difference between marketing and what's the difference between communications, okay? They are two totally different skill sets here. So I've always been a little bit frustrated sometimes when I read, and I've got all of these surveys going back 5-6 years, but this is one part of the survey where we've never achieved a really good outcome, which is around the reputation and trust and the communications that we have going, the dialogue going both ways. And I've always said, what is a robust action plan or plan that we can put in place that we can actually, you know, address these? And I think what you've just highlighted, Chair, of the things that came out of the Chair's meeting, is there an opportunity that we can actually have a more robust discussion with all councillors in a workshop around this particular, you know, risk that we've identified as being one, because I think it is around language. I don't believe we've articulated actually properly. We've identified what the issue is, but we haven't actually articulated a more robust action plan that would meet or drive us in a way. Because I go back to the year's performance in every annual plan and LTP plan where we look at those performance measures, what we've achieved and what we haven't. And there is a, if you were to graph it out rather than just have numbers, this is one of the ones where we've never really achieved. So is there a possibility for us to rework this particular?
And again, that was discussed at the chairs meeting.
Yeah.
They have a workshop on not only reputation and trust, but also community engagement, because they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And one impacts the other.
Yeah.
And so it was suggested that a workshop be held in the new year on this particular risk and strategic risk and community engagement.
Well, I'm pleased that actually we've taken it from a chairs meeting to actually a public forum here now, where it's actually an action plan and hopefully a recommendation, Chair.
Okay, right. Let's come back to that.
Thank you.
Chair, obviously there's been quite a bit of discussion around the survey that was completed. I just think it would be really useful for future deep dives if it could be more explicitly referenced in the sort of conclusion around what the current state is, so that in fact that becomes a bit more of a benchmark and measure for the effectiveness of this actions for this strategic risk.
Okay, thank you. So we just move on then, if everyone's had the discussion. I just want to come back to this particular deep dive when we address the recommendations to the last one, but feasibility of Watini partnerships. So has anyone got any comments on this? Councillor Neal?
Yes, Chair, if I've got just a circle around action plan. Consider resourcing around continuous education for staff, and then continue to remain engaged, listen and talk with mana whenua and iwi partners, and formalisation of relationships involving councillor participation. The words there that I'm a bit concerned about is continue to remain engaged. I'm not sure that I know whether we are engaged or not. I think we have some letters of agreement that have been exchanged, but beyond that, I don't know what's happened. And so it just sounded again, maybe it needs fleshing out as to where we're actually at with those relationships.
Through you, Chair, there was extensive engagement, for example, around the representation review.
Yeah.
Where we met on their own whenua, and also had the various groups come here and talk to a selection of councillors and staff in relation to issues. And while that engagement was about the representation review, the opportunity in every case was taken to go wider. We do have the one thing that, and so the word continue here is used. It's in relation to what's happened this year. I don't know what happened prior to that, but also one thing that did happen prior to that was that we signed an MOU, and we need to unpack that and understand what the expectations are of that MOU on all parties. We're now in a position to better address that issue going forward. Now that we have a new staff member on board.
And I think that answer there isn't reflected in that sentence. To me, it's sort of, so I think the answer is good. We need to just get that into the document.
I think, point taken. I think when we wrote it, we were thinking there's a lot going on operationally, but we've been without a dedicated resource for 6 months, so it's strategically we'll prepare for it again. So I think operationally, there's been still quite a lot going on, but, yeah, it's.
And I suppose just from my perspective as a councillor, you know, I'm just, and having heard people say, well, what relationships, especially with the representation review, you know, we did come in under some criticism. So I think hearing that answer from the chief executive just needs to get into the document.
Can I just say, I think, you know, sometimes some of the reports that are given to us by our officers probably don't articulate the true operation of the engagement that we have, because from Plan Change 49 Variation 1, mana whena work were actually part of the site visits and things like that. So they are part of the conversation when it comes to the RMA, but it is lacking in the reports that come back. So in the memorandum of understanding that we did sign, it does have a criteria and expectation of both us and them in it. If you go back and have a look at it, we just need to make sure, like what Kate has done here, that we actually refer to those things when we meet those expectations and not just take it for granted that we know that we've done that.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a matter of articulating it a little bit better in our reports that these things are happening. Yeah. So that we as elected people are able to say, actually, yes, it does.
When
But
we
we
go
have-
out there and communicate.
Yeah, but we have other MOUs that we need to sign with mana whenua as well. But that journey hasn't finished.
Through you, Chair. I'm interested in hearing from officers around what is meant by the refocusing of the Kaita Kawenga Kaupapa Māori role in terms of how that might look different and with the person incoming compared to what the role might have been 6 months ago when the previous person departed.
Good question.
Through you, Chair, there is actually a report coming to policy which explains that difference in detail. The difference, just a summary of the difference, is that historically, people that have ended up in the role have perhaps been more interested in the development of te reo skills with other people and less focused on input into more strategic decision making that council has to make. This time round, and with the assistance of Liz and Kanihi from Lower Hutt Council, we deliberately went to the market to find somebody who had more capacity to provide high-level strategic advice on Māori issues. And that's what we mean. But this is not about focus of the role, primarily is about that strategic input and advice into decision making. Secondly, it is about internal organisational capacity building. In the past, that internal capacity building has tended to dominate the outputs of that role. So we've changed it around.
That's great, thank you.
All right, any other comments? Okay, so let's focus on the recommendations. So we'll go one by one. First recommendation, I'll move that the committee receive the notes, the report titled Strategic Risk Management Report. Have a second of it. Councillor Bentley, all those say aye.
Aye.
Thanks, carry. The next one concerns the next exercise according to our February meeting. I'd like to recommend that we substitute infrastructure deficit, the strategic risk, with community engagement, strategic risk, now that we have discussed that and intend to have a workshop. And also now, so I'd like to substitute infrastructure deficit for community engagement. Is everyone happy with that? All right, so I'll move that This committee confirms the next deep dive to be undertaken for the Risk Insurance Committee meeting in February 2025 will be funding, community engagement, organisational culture and natural capital. Have a second, please. Councillor Newell, thank you. Any
Can I-
debate?
Yeah. So when I look at the landscape that we're in with regard to infrastructure, I think that's an important one that we're actually kept up to date with the backlog, how we're tracking with the backlog, where we sit, particularly around the changes of funding for transport. You know, where we've lost, I think it's 64% in one area, 15 in another. It would be nice to know how that's reflected against our LTP, what we're going to do and what we're not, so we can communicate that. And then also, you know, we've just had a report saying our pipes aren't as bad, we're in the second tier rather than the first tier, out of, you know, the ranking that came out from the academics out of the thing. So I'm not quite sure whether, you know, it's a good idea to actually substitute that. I'd rather substitute the natural, what is it? Hang on.
Natural capital.
And take that one out, would be my preference.
So through you, Chair, I will say, councillor Swales, I was concerned that we had already bumped natural capital from 2 RAC meetings. And I thought that it would potentially signal to the wider community that in fact we didn't take that risk seriously as a council, if we didn't actually, if it continued to get bumped. So I would strongly advocate that, you know, we do allow that to at least come to this meeting. So if you, so if I can just refer you through to the schedule page, which is 31, you'll see that we've actually had a line through that natural capital twice. And I thought that it was therefore important that we didn't just continue bumping that.
So the last time we talked about, oh, sorry to you.
Yep, it's okay. Any further comment?
Well, I want to keep the infrastructure one. I'm just looking at the one, whether I'd be happy to move that. Which through the organisational competency, that's been bumped twice too.
Infrastructure deficit, I'm happy to bump. Because I'd rather keep a fund than ones, but we've done that this year already.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Through you, Chair, I will say the only reason I choose the restricted deficit is I did wonder, given that there are a number of conversations happening around local would have done well anyway, in terms of the council, that potentially that's hidden airtime irrespective. But I think it would be important that it's coming through to the next RAC after that. So rather than,
I suppose my concern is that local would have done well as taking over from other infrastructure issues that we've got.
in terms of road
that get hidden and not brought up. So
There's
I
not
would,
much difference between February and May.
I know, but I just know that that's second quarter, we're looking at an annual plan, right, coming up. So in consultation on that, I just don't want us as elected people to get that information when it's too late to have a conversation or sculpt how, if we go out for public consultation on an annual plan. Yeah,
Okay.
but you know, this is a democratic process.
So we'll have the debate. I'll put councillor Griffin.
Can I just ask a point of clarification? I vaguely remember that we used to do 3 deep dives and extended it to 4 and put the onus on staff to be doing them. I'm not suggesting that we do any more.
We did 4 in order to get through them all in a suitable timeframe. Right, the debate, I think, has been exhausted, so I'm going to put the motion. All those in favour of the motion B as amended to substitute infrastructure deficit for community engagement, say aye. Aye.
Against and recorded.
Sarah. And lastly, I'd like to move the recommendation tied into the workshop, which would read, I suggest, request that this committee request council officers to arrange a workshop to discuss strategic risks, reputation and trust and community engagement. Is everyone happy with that wording? Oh, I'll move it. Have a second. That's the purpose. And
Time frame.
Well,
Normally you like that, don't you?
okay, that's nice. Right time frame with your CEO or group manager.
I'll defer to the CEO.
We'll need to have a look at the calendar for proposed meetings and workshops. But yeah, let's say before March.
Okay, so we'll add by March 2025.
If we were able to, we did talk about that the organisational culture description may not continue to be as expensive as we would like it to be, about whether that can also be part of that workshop.
The strategic risk, you mean?
Yeah. So
That's H.
So there's just, at the moment, it has a very councillor flavour, and
That's going to, well, it's going to be considered by the risk insurance in February.
yeah, but we had talked about ideally changing, making the scope slightly different, which might be one more appropriate conversation for to have in a workshop.
Through you, Chair, I think this is perhaps an issue in relation to most of the wording in relation to these risks. And as you've been through them, I'm sure you will have all noticed that the top bit in grey is actually your words from workshops. And so if you disagree with those words, or you don't think they're particularly coherent, and I don't think they are in all cases either, then yes, they do need to be revised or reviewed. Because some of them, and you picked on a good one, it talks about staff in one section, but then rapidly shifts to council in another section. And if you've sat down and tried to write a meaningful action plan around what's written in the grey boxes above the bit below, it's nigh on impossible. And so, yes, you're correct, there needs to be better alignment.
Just to address your comment is that if the workshop is held in March and we have the next committee in February to look at organisational culture, then not going to work. Although we could recognise that having done the deep dive in February of organisation culture, any questions that arise from that can be included in the workshop. So we can address that in February if you like.
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, right. Okay, so Councillor Bennett.
Just on the schedule of deep dives going forward, can we just have it fixed so we're not debating at every workshop about which ones get done? And then it's just a genuine rotation. They get done evenly and, you know, they properly get looked at.
We have done in the past, it's just in recent.
I know, and that's what I'm getting at.
Because of the LTP that things got changed.
Yeah, but it's just, otherwise some of them just keep getting kicked out, and it's just, why do you have it there if you're not going to look at it?
Yep. Quite agree. Well, in fact, in February, we then agree on the next 12 months deep dives at any rate. So then we should stick to those deep dives once we've agreed in February.
Yeah.
Yeah, Chair. So the comments that we've made about the reporting there in the deep dives, what happens to that? Are they added into or are they noted, or how do we?
Through your chair. I think I would take some of them, I'll take them away and have an edit of some of them. I think what I'm hearing is that there is a need to update some of them, and I do wonder through chair, it might be easiest if I take them away and through ELT, we bring it back.
Yeah.
But some of them updated to
Great.
reflect the comments. Yeah, I mean, more accurately for where we are now, because it has been, as Jeff says, it's been difficult because it has been over years since these were workshops. And so.
And if you wish, getting a lot, want to make the workshop, you could do that as part of the.
So I
getting
think
it posted to-
as a first attempt, I will take those away and incorporate that flavour.
Thank you.
So we've got motion that this committee requests council office for arranging workshops to discuss temporary restriction of trust and communication by March 2025. I move. Councillor Griffiths seconded. Any debate on that? If not, I'll put it to the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Carried. Thank you. Moving on to you going to here, number 5. 14. Oh, 14. Over to the Treasury report.
Sensitive expenditure, please.
Oh, sorry.
Happy to move it.
Right, I'll move that the sensitive expenditure report would be
Say that faster.
whatever it is. Received and notes the total entitled sensitive expenditure report. Have a second, please. Councillor Bentley, all in favour say aye. Against?
Oh, hang on.
Oh, wait,
Pardon? Do you
Yeah,
want-
I'd like to ask a question
Ask a
about it.
question, certainly.
Yeah, so I'm just curious about our policy on childcare for council meetings. I do remember many years ago us voting on this, and I just wondered, I don't recall as, you know, what is the policy?
It got changed.
Then it's changed.
It's been changed.
Central
By
government.
council,
Yes.
council voted for
Yeah.
it, within that year.
Okay, all right.
Cool, okay, moving on to the Treasury reports. Look at that one, which is item number 8. Do you have any updates? 8. Right, okay,
Yes.
any questions on the Treasury report? Councillor Lover.
On page 6, 4 borrowing mechanisms. And in the last point, it's saying that borrowing is driven by the ability to rate. And then on page 58, there's 4.9, secure borrowing with a charge over rates revenue. And I just wondered if I could get a little more definition around that and whether there's a requirement to assess rates in their affordability to the community. So it's like the borrowing is reliant on our ability to rate. So, and I just wondered about the definition around the last line in 4.9 with a charge over rates revenue. What does it mean to have a charge over rates revenue with LGFA?
For you, Chair, it means that they can have a charge over the rates revenue.
Security.
And security.
So that's their
It's like a
security.
mortgage, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is not normally, in a normal household, it's on your house or assets. In this environment, it is on your rates revenue. That is the ability to effectively rate or tax is what makes the organisation attractive to a banker. If I can put it like that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions or comments on the Treasury report? Councillor. Ms. Bradley?
So on page 40, on page 40, there's a little table there, and it talks about interest rate risk being compliant until September 25, and funding risk being compliant until May 25. And just wondering if you're able to talk those through for me, because I can't really see that coming through in the later paragraphs in terms of explaining that you're going to be going out of compliance.
So through you, Chair, we have a monthly, we have external treasury advisors and we have monthly meetings with them. And part of what we do with them is discuss the next strategy of purchasing, hedging, etc. to keep ourselves compliant. To be compliant until September 25 is very good. Sometimes we're much shorter than that. The funding risk compliance, that is linked to what we need to borrow. So if we are spending money, if the council is spending money on the pool, for example, we will go to market and get debt and keep ourselves compliant with the strategy through hedging, borrowing, and the various ratios. So it's a rolling type approach.
So I guess what I was a little bit confused about is that I would have expected to have seen then in paragraph 18 in the graph that we would have gone out of compliance in 2025. And I guess I'm not really seeing that in that graph 18, and that was what was confusing me.
It's got slightly different parameters in it, but underlying it. Slightly different data that underlies that one.
That one compared to the table above.
I'm happy to explain.
If it would be possible to get maybe something just back in writing, that would just be useful for me to, in terms of general learning. And I probably thought the same thing about the funding risk, that it looked like the funding table graph that's in 19 didn't necessarily reflect that tick as well. So there's probably something different there too.
Happy to explain it further.
Thank you.
Councillor Bentley, well, the two additional recommendations I'd like to move. So if you'd like to move the first recommendation, Councillor Bentley, that the committee recommends the council receive the notice of the report of the Treasury report. Yep. So, Ms. Brantley seconds it, so any debate on that? If not, I'll put it to the vote, all in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried, thank you. I'd like to add two recommendations. First, the next one B is note that as a result of the Standard & Poor credit rating of A, the council is in breach of its current treasury policy. Which it is, until we amend it.
Can you say that again, please, Chair?
Note that as a result of the Standard & Poor credit rating of A, the council is in breach of its current treasury policy.
Why?
Treasury management policy.
Why?
Treasury policy has a general objective of
We have a
A.
general objective of an A+.
Yeah, well, you need to state that, that's why you
Yeah.
breached it.
Because, okay,
Exactly.
because the
Oh, sorry.
general objective is A+.
And you've got a line to it in the thing, but you need to state that here.
So
Yeah.
that's the whole recommendation. So I'll move that. Anyone to second? Councillor Swales, any debate? Okay, all in favour say aye.
Aye.
Thanks, carry. And the last one is that this committee approves the revised treasury management policy dated November 2024.
Through you, Chair. There's,
Have a second first, please. Councillor Bentley.
sorry, we had a discussion about that.
Right.
Yeah.
That means
You
I
now
can
have
dispute that.
discussion about it.
Oh, okay, yeah, second it, sorry. Okay, I have given some feedback around a couple of things. The first one was the table that talks about the borrowing limits, and just asking whether that could be made a little bit clearer. So if I can take you through to apologies, to page 55, where there's a sub-bullet that talks about that council will operate in a debt cap of 250, but it's actually not part of the table. I've just asked council officers to incorporate that. And then I've asked for one further change to be made, which is down in page 26, which is around the reporting. 26 of the policy, 73 of the papers, where it has revaluation of financial instruments. Just to note that there are times where your annual report goes directly to council, and so that doesn't actually come up to RAC. So just altering that the recipient could be RAC or council, and adding in a bullet just to say that it would be through the annual report approval process.
Thank you. The one back on page 5542, borrowing limits, we're going to show the internal debt, then the resilience part, then the total. So we just split it up into three. So gradually gets to the 280 rather than how it's presented at the moment.
Through you, Chair, we also talked about the wording on, under general objectives, so I'm just wondering whether you're able to read out the revised wording. Or where the A+ was being altered.
Note that as a.
No, not the revised wording and the recommendation, but there was some revised wording to go onto the policy.
On page
That
49.
Kate was going to look at.
Page 2 of the document.
Maintain a standard S&P credit rating.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the bottom one, the 49 are general objectives, the third bullet point, we take out, cross out the word minimum, so it just says maintain Standard & Poor's credit rating. We maintain a Standard & Poor's credit rating, and we add a second bullet point, another bullet point. Take action to have a Standard & Poor credit rating of A or higher. That's our objective. Which
You
replaces.
don't even need to say that much, you just need to say Standard & Poor's credit rating, which is what's in the document.
Well, we discuss having it a bit more specific.
Through you, Chair, there was probably, I did have a discussion with the Chair on this about trying to at least leave in the Treasury policy a desirable state of being at least A in order to maintain the cheap cost of borrowing. If it drops below the A, then you can move into a more expensive cost of borrowing through your DFA.
And one, the second bullet point is expanding on having a Standard & Poor credit rating, because we don't want a BB minus or a BB. So we, as before we had a target of A+, we're just saying it should be A or higher.
Moving is ultimate.
Okay, right.
Can I ask a question there? Standard & Poor's are not the only people that do an accredited credit rating, right? Have we at any time gone and looked at, is it Murdoch's or
Moody's.
Moody's? Yeah, to see if there's a cost comparison, if it's cheaper?
We've had this rating for 3 years. We've just talked to the regional level about the idea of putting an RFP and seeing, or RFI rather, and seeing what interest we get.
Oh, so we are looking.
We've had an initial discussion as a group in the region on that, yes.
And that's just our metro region.
Yeah.
From Master.
It's these account masters, they don't have
Right, they don't.
ratings.
Okay.
It's only metro.
So you'll let us know whether that goes
Yeah,
ahead or.
We'll keep carrying on with that.
Okay.
As far as I see it go.
So just a question then, so with these amendments that we're suggesting, they will come back as to full council as highlighted amendments, extra amendments that we've put in here as a track change, so that our other colleagues are aware of what we've agreed, just that we bring them along.
It'll go along to full council.
Yeah.
For full sign off.
Yeah, with the additional track changes in there. That's the extent.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a legislative.
Yeah.
Policy you have to have.
Yeah, I know, but if we're changing the words and inserting staff, we're not all full council here. So it would be nice for them to understand and appreciate what that is compliant here, but what we've changed is, yeah. Thank you.
So we haven't voted on that third recommendation, which is to approve the revised Treasury Management Policy November 24. So I'll vote to the vote, all vote and say aye. Against, carry. And the suggestion is that the revised Treasury report with the amendments be attached when we consider the risk and assurance meeting minutes at the next council meeting. Right? Okay, cool.
And can I now have a bit of a discussion here before you move on?
Yes.
Good, thank you. So with regards to this coming to, so this also has an implication on the manual of delegations, doesn't it? Or manual of policies, or is this a standalone? Because you are changing some of the financial delegations in here.
This is a standalone policy.
Yeah, but but also in our manual of delegations, it has different titles which have different abilities, financial abilities, which you've got in here.
It's just the replacement of your
Yeah.
former title with your new one.
Yeah. Yeah, so it will have an, yeah.
No tangible impacts.
It's not a change other than it's form, not substance.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But where sometimes confusion comes in is that not all our papers actually relate to Treasury and say the same thing. What's the rest? You've got. It's okay.
Right, moving on.
That's that's my current title, so that's the only one that's changed in there, so, yeah.
Moving on, we'll address now, item number 9, quarterly legislative compliance report to the 30th September 2024. So I'll go ahead and comment or question. Brandon?
Yeah, yes, I just want to express a concern. So under paragraph 6, it talks about the compliance report for June having just gone up to the council's. I do think it's important that if for any reason RACs are missed, that in fact those reports do actually then still go to the next RAC, because these reports are always done on a quarterly basis, and so it does mean that in fact RAC haven't had an oversight effectively of that March to June quarter. So I think it would be useful for that to be included effectively just as an appendix for next RAC, so that in fact it's part of official record.
Okay, so we'll have that noted. Minutes, thank you. Any comment or questions on this report? Sure. As a ultra.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about, so page 76 has got the Resource Management Act, and there's the complaints about the smell that has, so then we've got a abatement notice on to complete the biofilter plenum. Is that to do with the smell? And if it is, I'm just wondering about there's a requirement for a please explain letter for Greater Wellington Regional Council. And one of the things that I've been thinking around the smell is when I was at the wastewater treatment plant for a tour, they were talking about the amount of detergents and paints and things that go down the drains and cause a problem for the plant. And I'm just wondering how much the antibacterial content in what we're flushing is making a difference to the smell in the processing, because the bubble pool that has all the live bacteria to process everything is obviously interrupted by antibacterial detergents. And I just wondered if that's something that has been looked into by Wellington Water.
What I suggest, councillor, is that you attend the Hutt Valley Services Committee.
Yeah.
On Friday.
9:30 down at Hutt.
No.
No, here.
I will do
On
that.
Friday.
Yeah, I will do that. I just wondered if it's something that should go into the please explain letter, and whether it's something that should be on Greater Wellington's radar as,
I don't think.
you know, because it's something for the whole community, isn't it? That, you know, what you flush makes a difference to the processing.
Through you, Chair, look, long story short, that is not the root cause of the current problem. The problem really stems from aging, failing, poorly maintained equipment.
We're not allowed to go to the committee meeting at 9:30 Friday.
I'll be there.
Very good. Might even get speaking rights. Yes. Who are you cheering? Right. Okay, Brandon.
Through you, Chair. There's just a few of the reporting in terms of compliance breaches where there's no detail on when what the proposed timeframe to fix some of these issues, and also what the impact of being in breach isn't necessarily explained. So if I can just maybe work through those with officers. So the first one is in para 7G, where it talks about the Fire and Emergency New Zealand regulations. And just wondering whether we can have a bit of a time frame for when those discussions will happen. One of the things that concerned me is if there happened to be an incident and we're not following these regulations, then what is the, I guess, the liability, or what is the risk to council, given that obviously we've been informed that we're in a breach?
The director, group manager, community secretary.
Through you, Chair, one of those buildings already done, it's just evacuation plans that need to be on the wall, and the second one will probably be done in the next week or two. So they're in hand and they will be done. One is done, as I say, and the other one is due to be done at any time now.
Fantastic. As I said, I was concerned if there was an incident that potentially there might be some risk to the council. The next one was under paragraph 7H, which related to the CBD liquor control and prevention of nuisance. And again, was really wanting to understand time frame to address these bylaws expiring, or what is the impact, and what is the impact of them not being in effect anymore?
The bylaw on liquor is due to go to a workshop on 27th of November. The one on smoking is not yet started and might not be needed. And the alcohol and gambling, the gambling one is underway.
So that workshop, to consider the liquor control bylaw, will that take consideration of the possibility of having a community alcohol program? I think it's called CAP, whatever it's called.
The CAP,
Yeah.
yeah. Through you, Chair, I can't answer that at this point in time.
CEO?
No, through you, Chair.
Because that's the act was amended earlier last year, I think it was. So that where a council has a cap, people could not go to court and oppose it.
You know, through LAP, which is the local alcohol.
Yeah.
That is not part of the bylaws, and it is something that we are considering in discussing with councillors. If you remember when we brought this a number of years ago, exactly what you said, there was litigation happening all over the place. Councils were incurring significant costs, and the decision was made not to proceed with a LAP at that particular point in time.
Because some of them were being challenged.
Yeah, that
because
was
the
all,
wording was not right.
Auckland City Council was the main problem. So there will be a workshop considering that eventually.
What is mentioned here, the bylaws, is separate from that, and there is some discussion that I've had with policy team and others around when that might come back through.
Right, thank you. Yeah. Any more questions?
Just in terms of following on from that question, pleased to hear that the work's underway, but obviously we are expiring shortly. What's the impact of them having expiring if we haven't replaced them in time?
Through you, none at the moment, as far as I'm aware. And certainly like the dangerous, affected and sanitary, the same policy is still in force until the new one comes into place. And with that dangerous, affected and sanitary, that's been done on a workshop on the 27th of this month. And then it's papers coming to council hopefully on the 11th of December in regard to that.
Okay, so even though they expire, basically the old one applies until a formal replacement appears.
Through you, that is my understanding, yes.
Thank you.
That's all right.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I just wondered about the page 78, 8N, is the long-standing compliance issues around freedom camping. I'm just wondering when there'll be an opportunity to identify locations that are suitable for freedom camping.
Through you, Chair, there was a paper brought to council in 2017, 22nd of August, in a workshop. So it was about freedom camping, and it identified at Harcourt Park, Ladle Bend and Kaitoki as the accepted. And then there were a number of other sites put forward. Some of them, or probably the better sites, personal view, were on Greater Wellington Regional Council land, and that never progressed. So in respect to what's mentioned in here, I'll take it on board to have a chat with our open spaces and facilities manager and legal around what our legal requirements are in respect to that. And then if there is a desire that we need to go back and look at that, we can then do that either in a workshop or bring something to a council meeting.
Because there was a legislative change, I think, that provoked that workshop back in 2017, that needed to have that conversation. Yeah.
And what came out of that, and it was in the workshop, there was no actual papers or any things came out of that, which is something that I'll look into, the whys and the wherefores.
Thanks, Mike.
Through you, Chair, just looking at 8L, which is around the Reserves Act, again, just probably wanting to know a time frame to resolve, but also what are the implications of not having a plan?
Through you, Chair, not sure what the implications are. General Counsel might be a little bit better, but we have basically draft management plans for all of our parks that from 2002. They sit right beside the open spaces and facilities manager's desk. We refer to them and use them on a regular basis. What the legislative requirements are in respect to reviews, etc., I'm not sure, and that is something that I will check on what that actually involves and whether we've actually got the resource to be able to do it if it is a really, really comprehensive undertaking, because as I say, there are a number of very, very large documents that form that management plan.
So you're saying that the first line on page 78 is not correct? We do have reserve management plans.
No, we do, but they're non-compliant.
No,
Through you, we do have them, but the comment here is around the continuous reviewing of them. We use them.
We do not have reserve management plans for most of our reserves, so that's not true. Flat statement. We do have.
Through you, Chair, that is
plans, but they're out of date.
that is correct. Saw it with my own eyes today.
Through you, Chair, that was the information that we received in response to the survey.
So we'll just correct it now. Okay, I've got another question is on M on page 78 about not using the Hut News. Have we advised licence holders that they must use the Post in future? That is being proactive. So he says, council incorrectly advised applicants to advertise in the Hut News. Legal advice provided confirming the Post is the only newspaper meet requirements. And then you say you're moving on to online portal, but in the meantime, would not be proactive to communicate with licence holders that when they come to renew their licences, alcohol licences, they must use the Post?
Through you,
How about being proactive in your comms?
I'll be able to help with that. So it is correct that licence holders weren't advised. The reason being people concerned just didn't think about it, officers concerned. It's possible that public notice wasn't given correctly as a result. So there's a possible breach of the legislation. We assess that as low level. The Post is expensive, and so it was queried as to who would be looking in the Post and the public notices. The Hut News is the most read newspaper. We have now moved to website notification, so that should address it and have far greater visibility. And I believe a notice is actually placed on the civic building as well about this.
Okay. So if a entity is about to renew its alcohol licence, they can do it through the council's website and doesn't need to advertise in the Post. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
I think that is correct.
I've seen
Yes.
it done. I
Yes.
But my question is, do current licence holder, alcohol licence holders
Yes.
know about this?
Yes.
And wouldn't it be a good idea to proactively advise them that
Oh, sorry.
of this,
Right.
that in future when they come to renew their licence?
They haven't been individually advised.
I would recommend that council officers consider being proactive in this matter and advise licence holders.
So we'll take that through to the relevant group manager.
Thank you.
I have a
Councillor
question
Swan.
following on this. What is our readership of our website? What's our reach?
Sure.
Just a quick question, you know, if we're gonna put public notices on our website, and it's a cheaper option for people, the legislation has changed under the alcohol legislation in that the onus is put on, community being engaged and having the opportunity to challenge a licence and for them to be heard. So I'm just saying, I mean, I know that it's cheaper, but I'm just thinking, you know, we get stats to a committee that I don't sit on about the traffic that comes to our website. I'm not against it. I'm just saying, are we getting it out there in enough places?
Through
We can take that one away. I can't remember what it says. Yeah, we do, you're right, we do get them covered, but I can't remember.
Yeah,
what they are.
Just
but more than likely it would be higher than.
And the readership?
Some of the posts.
Yeah,
it's good.
okay.
And
It's
just,
not just about who looks at the website, it's who looks at a page
Well, yeah,
And we get
looking
that,
for
and we get
liquor
that,
licensing changes.
that's reported to the city services.
we get that.
Who looks at what papers, how far down they go from the first page. I'll just make a comment on page 78 about the local government funding agency, where in the past we didn't have a budgeted balanced budget. We did, as part of the long-term plan, approve a motion to say that we were not compliant with the Local Government Act in terms of not having a balanced budget until year whatever it is, 2006.
Yes,
One?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So in fact, that statement is not actually accurate.
Well, it is accurate, excuse me, it is accurate for the year we're in.
Yeah, but we have passed that motion, so just to highlight that. Are there any other comments or questions before the motion is put?
Yep, Chair. Just the Holidays Act thing, this has been hanging over us for quite some time, hasn't it? And it says there that we've still got 6 years to recalculate and make remediation payments. So do we know what the extent of that is?
I'm happy to answer it, or
Are you happy? Oh, yeah.
Through you, Chair. We did a lot of work. We did an initial piece of work that came to this committee in February. And we identified an amount of money that was estimated in the internal audit work done. And then from there, the first thing that had to happen was a new payroll system. The current payroll system is not necessarily compliant with the new legislation. That is currently underway and well progressed. And once that is in, the next project is to do the remediation work, which will in itself be quite a lot of work. But we've got it underway.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Altra.
Thank you, through your chair. There's the, just below that. Sorry, we're still on page 78, bottom of the page, where it's talking about the Impounding Act, and that the council currently has no space to operate for horse, cattle, deer, that type of thing. I mean, I have seen a ranger with a sheep in the back of the van at one point. I'm sure they'd help in a animal welfare situation. So is it just that there's no property available to confine an animal in that situation? Is that the only issue? And whether or not we would have any private property owners that could fill that space?
I'm sure you could volunteer that, councillor.
Yeah, well, I'm sure my husband wouldn't mind.
Through you, Chair, I understand that there is a legislative requirement, etc., but the officers that deal in that particular space on a case-by-case basis on the rare occasions that it takes place, either find the owner or find appropriate homing for that animal.
Example, it's a sheep that needs a lawn cut. Right,
Through you, Chair.
yes.
My final question, just under, paragraph 7, five, it says Local Government Rating Act, and it says work auditing rating databases ongoing. There are some properties that have not been rated correctly and the finance team are working through them to correct where applicable. Just wondering whether there's a time frame for correcting those, and also whether the people who have been incorrectly rated, whether they are aware that they have been.
Through you, Chair, there is no timetable on that. That is an ongoing piece of work. And the way we do it is we notify people and in the next year they're corrected. Yeah. It is, may I say, it's not a large number of people thus far. We've been very open here with putting this, and we're talking a handful max. And it is work that's done in the database as it's discovered.
In other words, it's always occurring.
Yeah, yeah, because people change things and don't tell you they're changing from being.
Thank you.
Cool. Right,
So just to follow on, Chair, on that, and we talked about doing a rates review. There is a segment in the community in forestry where we looked at rating them, and then we said that we dropped it from 500 to a lesser value, but is it my understanding that that rates review is not going to happen in the next 12 months? We've had one workshop.
Through you, Chair. I will come back to council in February with some work on the rates review. What my initial work led me to was that there was some pre-work that needed to be done before we went out for a full rates review. And the other factor in that is the impact of the speed at which local water done well is occurring and what impact that will have on this council and rates. Quickly, like that.
Right. So we don't know whether it will be done in the 12 months that we said that it would happen. It is depending on external factors, which will still have an impact on some people that are under the impression that maybe a rates review will happen within 12 months. I'm thinking particularly of forestry.
There will be some initial work done within 12 months. And I will call that getting our house in order.
Okay. Thank you.
right, shall we put the recommendation? I'll move that this committee recommends the council receive the vote the report by the Board of Legislative Compliance report for 2024. Second, please. Ms. Brownlee, or I'll put it to the debate on it. What's the motion? Put the motion. We'll vote in favour and say aye.
Aye.
Yes, carried. And lastly but not least is the health and safety report. Any update? Our updates? Right. Any comments, questions?
Through you, Chair. I had, when I met with officers, suggested that the minutes would be more appropriate to include more detail out of the report so that the wider council was actually aware of some of the key aspects of this report. I have sent through some revised recommendations as a suggestion. And that's really around just making sure that some of the key elements, like the fact that refresher training continues to be made available, employee assistance continues to be offered, that the risk register is actually being reviewed, that in fact all of council is aware that some of the hygiene factors are actually continuing to be met. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions, comments?
So are some of those recommendations being picked up that were put and discussed at the Chair's meeting? Or
There's one's going to be in the recommendation.
And the others?
The others, not at this stage.
as I said, it would be my
I've seen
recommendation.
the specific ones, yeah.
Sorry, there are quite a few of them,
Quite a few of them.
and I would recommend that they become
Noted as a paragraph.
as noting recommendations in the minutes. I'd have them if you want me to read them out, but I don't know whether you wanted to do that.
Or frame,
Sorry,
or do a recommendation around that basis, yeah.
shall I read out my recommendation?
You can, yes. Along with that.
Just open it. So I was recommending that the committee recommends that council receives a notice of report titled Health and Safety Report with the following key points. First one being that first aid full and refresher training continue to be made available. And I did have an extra one saying in that council has XX so many trained staff that I think it would be useful for that to be on record in terms of how many trained staff you do have. Second one being the employee assistance program continues to be made available with quarterly utilisation rates less than 5% over the last year. That the health and safety risk register is reviewed 6 monthly with the last update by all managers with a further review by ELT in October 24, with 8 having a high residual risk rating. Then the fourth bullet, during the last 3 months, 21 health and safety workplace facility inspection audits were completed with either minor or no new hazards identified. Fifth point being the Health and Safety Committee continues to meet regularly with 2 meetings held last quarter on the 8th of August 24 and 19th September 24. Next bullet, that there have been no notifiable incident reported to WorkSafe since 2021. That there have been, next bullet, that there were no lost time injuries during the last quarter. Next bullet, there were 38 incidents, accidents / near misses, of which only 1 required a hospital visit. And then the last being there were 11 employee incidents during the quarter, of which 1 resulted in a minor injury. And they are a little bit detailed, but not expensive, but really just so that full council has an understanding of the key elements of health and safety that's being addressed by council officers.
Can I just say that I think that
Just before we do that, would you like to move that
Yes,
amendment to?
Can I move that amendment?
Can I have a second?
I will.
Thank you, councillor Swales. Now.
I was just going to say, I think it's a good précis of an executive summary that would go for the other elected members that don't come to this meeting. I think it's really important from an executive summary perspective, so that's why I support it.
And
sorry,
therefore,
can I add one more?
you do
That the committee, sorry, that the committee reminds council.
I'm going to do that as a separate.
Oh, separate one? Great. Sorry.
And can we have that as a going forward for future reports to this committee? Let's bring in those more detailed items that arise from the report. Okay, any question?
No.
Right, okay. So any debate on that recommendation? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All the favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. And the recommendation I would like to, there was a discussion at the Chairs meeting about that all councillors have a responsibility under the Health and Safety at Work Act, but not all councillors are a member of the Risk and Assurance Committee, and therefore do not read the Health and Safety report on Stella. And so I would like to move the recommendation is that this committee notes that all councillors can access the Health and Safety report on Stella and are invited to raise questions. So that's really a bit of a safeguarding our responsibility under the Health and Safety Act, that we have drawn it to all councillors, because councillors are equally and separately responsible under the Health and Safety at Work Act. So I'm going to move that. Right, have you got that?
Yeah, can you just confirm?
Right, that this committee note that all councillors can access the Health and Safety report on Stella and are invited to raise questions.
If you want to specify who they need to raise questions with. Is that what it is?
The performance and capacity
Can I ask a
Or,
question?
or chair.
Can I ask a question about that? Because when governance send out reminders that agendas are accessible on Stella, just a point of clarification for governance. Do all of, I mean, I know that I get the notice of city services and I'm not on city services. I'm assuming that other councillors that are not on this yet. Yeah, so I'm not quite sure of the relevance of this other one, other than, you know, just a reminder maybe in policy that something might be put in policy that under, or maybe it's a discussion that happens when we have a get together with His Worship and the CEO, just a reminder of the responsibilities of elected people. I don't think it needs to be a recommendation.
It's not a reminder and all that, it's specifically pointing out under the Health and Safety at Work Act, all councillors are equally and civilly responsible for any breaches of the Health and Safety at Work Act. And therefore, we are now establishing that fact as a matter of record in the meeting minutes, as a matter of it's
I think
just
that's
a
in the
legal
induction.
necessity, I think, that needs to be explicitly stated once and for all, that all councillors should be looking at the health and safety report and invited to ask questions. Whether they do or not is irrelevant, but at least we've raised the point, like anything else, like raising the point. But I take your.
I just think that it should, a memo or something around culture and safety should come to the full council or policy where, or even the finance committee where everyone is a member, but I'll be voting against it.
Well, we're going to put it to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Right, show of hands. 2. Those against? 2. And I do the casting vote. It's carried.
Excuse me, Chair, but I believe that you stick with the status quo when the casting vote is done. That is the normal practice. Are you going against the normal practice, Chair?
Yes, I'm putting my casting vote and move, and therefore the motion is carried.
I will be asking governments to actually check that and challenge it.
Right. So there it
So
is.
can I please have it recorded that I voted against it? And I'm sure councillor Newell.
So that ends the health.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
That ends the risk and assurance meeting, and thank you very much for your perseverance and attending the live streaming of the committee meeting. Good afternoon. There we go.